Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's 2 p.m. local time here in New York, and we're going to get started in a few minutes. But while we wait for everyone to log on, we want to learn a little bit more about you, our audience. So please tell us in the chat box where in the world you're joining from, and maybe where in the United States you hope to do your internship. Or if you are unsure where, maybe just tell us what you're more interested in learning in regards to the tips that we'll be speaking about today, whether it's improving your resume or your cover letters. So I'll start. My name is Fatima Rodriguez, and I am the Communications and Recruitment Manager here. Coordinator here at Career Training USA program at InterExchange. And as I mentioned, we are joining from New York City. So we have some responses coming in today. Right now, we have Kelly joining us from Ireland, and she's really looking to find an internship in Miami. We also have Isabella from Venezuela, and she's looking to do a business internship in Los Angeles area. Let's see who else is looking to. And we have Bar from Poland, and he wants to do an internship in Boston. So that's all like really cool to hear about where everyone is coming from. If anyone else wants to type in where they're from, we'd be happy to hear where you are. But, other than that, as we wait again for more attendees to come through, I just wanted to make a quick note. Due to the size of the audience, everyone is muted, but feel free to use our chat feature to ask any questions that you would have throughout the presentation. We do have different points in the webinar where we have pauses for some questions, so feel free to ask it during those times as well. And lastly, I wanted to make a note that this session is being recorded, and everyone who is registered will get a copy of get a copy of this recording after this session. So for those of you who are familiar with InterExchange, we are a cultural exchange program based in New York City, and our mission is to enable global experiences by assisting students and young professionals from overseas to partake in cultural exchange program in the United States, and to also help US students and young professionals experience programs in other countries. So within InterExchange, the Career Training USA program works with those seeking to undertake some internships and traineeships in the United States. So for that reason, today we're going to discuss creating successful resumes and cover letters. This is our third career guidance webinar in the series of 10 that will take place every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So over the next few months, we'll discuss a range of relevant topics from interviewing to the U.S. workplace, interviewing to U.S. workplace culture, to developing a professional online presence. So if you haven't already, I would encourage you to take a look at the remaining schedule and sign up for any other sessions that interest you, which again, you'll get a link to after this session. And since it is the start of the school year, for many of you all, we know that many prospective interns are using this time to really hone their skills and make themselves more competitive for future internships. And for that reason, we want to provide you with some tips and guidance for creating successful resumes and cover letters so you do land the internships of your dreams. And we have another response here. We have Abigail, who is from Portugal, and she wants to do an internship in Chicago. But with that, I think we'll hand it over to Taman, who is going to start the presentation.
Awesome, thank you, Fatima. I did not introduce myself. My name is Taman Nicholson. I am the program manager for Career Training USA, and like Fatima, I'm also joining from New York City. So just an outline of today's session. What we'll talk about today is the purpose and use of a resume. We'll talk about some different resume types, and then we'll provide some tips to create the perfect resume. And we'll discuss the purposes and uses once you do have that perfect resume. And after we talk about resumes, we'll start talking about cover letters and what a cover letter is, what are some typical cover letter formats that you might want to consider, and then we'll wrap up with some key takeaways for both. Like Fatima said, there's questions and answers that some people have submitted with their registration that we'll answer when we get to the appropriate points of the presentation, but we do have a question and answer section at the end if there's anything you'd like us to cover a second time or something that maybe we didn't cover in depth that you have a few concerns or questions about. So let's start with the resume basics. So resume 101. In a lot of parts of the world, a resume and a CV might just be synonyms, but in the US, a resume is a one-page summary of your work experience and the background that you have that is relevant to the job that you're applying for. Whereas a CV is typically a longer academic diary that includes all of your experiences, all of your certificates, all of your publications. Might not be necessary if you're applying for an internship position or a traineeship position in the United States. The resume is used to help you provide a summary of your skills, your abilities, and your accomplishments. And I think summary is the key word here. Hiring managers are looking for resumes for less than 30 seconds at a time as they're scanning through. So if you have a lot of information on there that's not going to stand out, your resume is not going to stand out. Make sure that you're able to summarize those key points so that you grab someone's attention as they're flipping through resumes for an open internship position. So there are two main uses for a resume. The first, which I talked about, is just applying for jobs and applications. But a second use is just general networking and having something you can share to people in your network. We do have an entire session on networking coming up, I believe, in 3 weeks. But a resume is a great thing to make sure your network has access to. They know your skills. They understand a summary of your background. So when you're crafting a resume, make sure that you're thinking about the specific resume you'll want to create for a specific position and the general resume that you might want to have to share with your network. And I think the last thing to remember is that a resume is a living document. It's something that you are going to go back and edit many, many times over the course of your life, and make sure that you're looking every 6 months at minimum at your resume to make sure that it is still accurate, it's still up to date, it still has the most important information that you want to share, and make sure that you're keeping it fresh and you are updating your resume as needed. So we talked about what a resume is, and that's where I wanted to start this conversation, but I think it's really important to discuss what a resume is not and what it should not be. So there are a lot of things that we see people put on their resume that are not relevant to their candidacy as an intern applicant. Employers should not be asking information that's not on your resume, and in a lot of places in the United States, it's against the law to discriminate against people with certain attributes. So you want to make sure that you're not putting the host employer in any difficult position by adding information that's not relevant to the position. So you don't need to put your picture. You don't need to put your marital status, your date of birth, your gender is not important. Religion's another thing that you don't want to put on a resume for a position in the United States. Really, any unnecessary personal information that is not going to affect you as a candidate for the position does not need to go on the resume. We're going to stop. I see that there's a couple questions that have already come in about resume basics, but afterwards we'll start talking about different types of resumes. So Fatima, do you want to read off I see there's 2 questions at least that have come in about resume basics.
Yes, there are 2 questions that did come in. The first question is, what contact information should I provide on my resume?
That's a great starting question. And I think the contact information that you want to put on your resume is the contact information that you would want a host employer to reach out to you by. So if you are not going to answer your phone for a number that you don't recognize, don't put your phone number on your resume. If it's just your email, that's all you need to put on your resume. You just need to put the contact information that you want a host employer to reach out to you by. You might be asked for your phone number as part of an application system, but on your resume itself, just email is fine.
Awesome, thank you, Tamin. And the second question that was being asked is, what is relevant to put on my resume? How can I put my experiences on paper?
I think that question sets us up really nicely for the next part of the presentation. So I'm actually not going to answer that right now, and maybe we can go back to that a little bit, but we'll talk about different ways to put your information on a resume and what might be most important depending on your background. So these are the three types of resumes that people can use. So we have chronological, we have functional, and we have hybrid. I wanted to test the waters a little bit and get a sense from the audience. What resume type do you think that you currently have? So we're just going to stop here and we're going to do a quick poll, and we'll read off the results before we move on to the next slide. So what type of resume do you think you have? Chronological, functional, or hybrid? It looks like we have 100% of people who have voted, so I think we can close this poll. And can we look at the results? Oh, wow, 50-50. So half the audience thinks they have chronological and half thinks they have a functional. No one thinks they have a hybrid, which is interesting. We'll still talk about hybrid though, but that's interesting. I was expecting to see chronological a lot higher than that. So we'll actually start with chronological because this is, for most people, the more popular option, or maybe even the best option, depending on what your background is. So this example of a chronological resume is very easy to read. It's to the point and it's targeted to the posted position. So we talked about contact information, and this person put their contact information at the top. They did put a street address. I don't think the host employer is going to be mailing them anything, so I don't know if this is necessary. You really just probably, their LinkedIn profile is excellent, their email address is perfect, but I don't think that that's another thing that you would need to worry about and use up space on your resume for. And next they went into their summary, so who they are, what they've done in their past that might be related to this position. Remember that this is a summary, so it doesn't have to be everything you've ever done. It's just maybe some key points about you that relate to this position. And next, they went with their education. So they listed in reverse chronological order what they had done most recently, Masters of Business Administration at Harvard University, and then a bachelor's at New York University. So they went from the most recent to the furthest away. And then they moved to their work and internship experience. And again, it's in that reverse chronological order. So it's 2016, then 2015, 2014. So it goes in reverse, and then last they put in some community involvement aspects. So other things that might not necessarily be in their professional experience. Going back to that question a few slides ago about what relevant information should I include in my resume, I think this is a great place where you can put some of that important information and some of your experiences, even if they haven't been professional experiences. One thing I really like about this resume example is how they have combined their work and internship experience into one section. So if you don't have any professional experience outside of internships, or you've done 3 internships and only one working position, you can put this all into one section. You definitely do have experience, and it doesn't necessarily just have to be work experience. It's only going in that section. So I think that's a key takeaway for one of these chronological examples, is just to combine that experience. Maybe you've done a work experience and then you did an apprenticeship and then you went back to the field of work, and all of that is relevant and doesn't need to be segmented into 2 different sections. So let's take a look at a functional resume. So for half of our audience, they said that a functional resume is the resume that they believe they have. And this is a good option if you have large gaps on your resume, or maybe you have shifted dramatically between positions, and the connections between what you've done in the past and the resume that the internship that you're applying for might not be relevant on your resume. So a functional resume focuses on the skills that you've developed. The qualifications of your past roles and responsibilities are highlighted over what the actual position was. And the summary is longer. It pulls out some specific skills that you might have that might be transferable between industries. And instead of focusing on your experience within previous roles, it focuses on the skills that you possess and draws out examples of how you've used them across settings. So instead of past roles, the bulk of your resume is your current expertise, maybe your project management or your ability to lead. And in this example, the person put in their summary, they put 9 skills, bolded them, put them in italics so that the person reviewing their resume can see, like, this is the skills that this candidate has. And then if they're interested in that, they can go into the skill summary a little bit more and then look at the work history further at the end and say, teaching isn't exactly what we do here, but they have all these other skills that are relevant to the position that we've hosted. And that way your resume doesn't necessarily get tossed aside just because you haven't done something similar to what the position is posted. So a hybrid example, which no one believes that they have, is exactly what it says it is. It's a mix of both chronological and functional. So it might be the best option if you have a bit of professional experience, but more qualifications from other experiences. And I think if you use a hybrid, one of the key takeaways here is to make sure that you do keep your resume organized, because it can get a little bit confusing if you're trying to use both formats in one resume. So in this example here, the person starts with their summary, what they've done in the past, everything that's related, all their skills, pretty similar to what we saw in a functional resume. And then they go into their education and their legal experience. So they tie it back to what is related to this position. I assume that they would be applying for a position in the field of law, because they highlight their paralegal internship, their legal secretary experience. So they start with the skills they do have and then tie it back in chronologically to their general experience and their general education as it relates. Some format things to consider for any type of resume is the quality of what you write versus the quantity of what you write. So on all three of those examples, there was a significant amount of white space. It didn't feel overwhelming to read any of them. I think the chronological had the most information, but was organized in a very neat and clear font, which is our second point. Make sure that the font size is large enough for someone to read, and make sure that the format is edited in a way that's easy for someone to read. Make sure that the person isn't overwhelmed, the reviewer isn't overwhelmed when they're looking at your resume. It's important to include components of your experience in education, but you don't want it just crowded out by a bunch of noise and a bunch of text. Make it easy to read for someone. Don't include any pictures or any shapes. Those aren't going to show up well on any type of automated software that might be parsing for resumes. Again, we talked about pictures being unnecessary information as far as personal information that you don't need to include on a resume. Make sure your contact details are clearly visible. It should be the biggest font size. It should be at the top. If you have a website, if you have a portfolio, make sure you're including that link. And if you don't, include a link to your LinkedIn profile. And keep your resume one page maximum early on in your career. Once you have a few more positions under your belt, once you're mid-level or advanced career, it might be appropriate to expand into a two-page resume. But if you're still in university or you're applying for your first internship or your first job position after college, you don't need a two-page resume at that point. You don't need to list all the skills you have or all the classes you've taken. You can certainly keep it to one page. So that's the format side of things. And I think the other aspect we have to consider is the content. Make sure that you have a general resume template that you have that you don't share with anyone, or maybe you share with your network. And any position that you do have, make sure you take that general template and you update it to whatever the job posting is asking for, the internship posting is asking for. Craft bullets that speak to the position within your experience, within your summary. Even if you're using some of your past coursework, think about which courses you want to include that directly relate to this internship posting. Mirror the words that you see in the internship posting with your experience. Look for the key skills section of the internship posting and make sure your resume has those key skills, or any job aspects that appear multiple times or under preferred qualifications. That should be reflected in your resume. It shows that you understand the facets of the job and that you're a good fit for the internship position. I've said this a couple times, but I want to keep reiterating that your resume should not be everything that you've ever done. It should be 6 to 8 bullets max for each position. Maybe you can have 10 on your general resume and then whittle it down from there for the resume that you actually submit to an internship position. And those bullets should be about what you achieved, not your assigned role to the position. It should be what you've done, what you were responsible for, the experience that you were able to garner from that position, not just what your your tasks were or what you were assigned to do. And we talked about updating it constantly. I said at least every 6 months, but I mean, updating it quarterly is probably a best practice because you might be learning new skills. You might have taken a course where you had a project that is related, and you want to make sure that you're keeping it fresh and you're thinking about all of those aspects and how they tie into you as a professional candidate. So a question that we see quite often is whether or not you need both a resume and a LinkedIn profile. So I'm going to toss this to our audience and ask you all, is it necessary? Do you need both a resume and a LinkedIn profile? All right, so we have a little bit of a, not as 50-50 as it was last poll. So about 3/4 of people think that you need both a resume and a LinkedIn profile. But still a quarter of you think that you only need one or the other. I would agree with the majority that you do need both. A resume is something that you can print out and you can hand to someone. It's useful for informal networking and general networking, but a LinkedIn profile is going to be more expansive. If someone sees your LinkedIn profile, excellent. Your resume is going to then reiterate some key experiences. But your resume, it cancels out some of the noise that you might see on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a general resume with additional information that you might be omitting anyway. I mean, it's a great way to include some of the non-relevant experience and skills that you have, and maybe that'll create some fodder with whoever the hiring manager is. It's a great way of networking with industry groups that maybe you don't already know of or you haven't been able to meet in person because of the pandemic. You can add some of your hobbies and interests, which really aren't relevant on your resume, but still round out you as a candidate and speak a little bit more about who you are, as well as what you've done. Just remember that LinkedIn, it's still a social media platform. So be careful what you post, be careful what you like. If you wouldn't be comfortable sharing or discussing whatever you're posting or liking about in a job interview, there's no need to put it on LinkedIn. I think that's a good rule of thumb. Would you want to discuss whatever you're discussing with a hiring manager? And your LinkedIn is great. It's 75% of the work right there. But you still need a resume to tailor that and to highlight the specific skills that are relevant to the position. So again, I'm going to agree with the majority here that you do want both a resume and a LinkedIn because they do serve two different purposes. Next week, we're going to switch roles and Fatima is going to talk about how to craft the perfect LinkedIn and social media presence as well. So if you don't have a LinkedIn, join us next week and we'll talk more about how you can make that a perfect addition to your internship application. I did mention applicant screening systems, so I do want to talk about application screening systems and what they are. So sometimes your resume might go through a screening system before it ever sees human eyes because the company might just be receiving too many applications. And make sure you consider this possibility when you're putting together your resume. The system is looking for keywords in your skills and in your education and your experience. And those are going to be keywords that are similar to what you saw in the internship title, in the description headlines. Anything used more than twice, anything that's considered successful criteria for a candidate, these are phrases that you should be using and not necessarily synonyms. Try and use those phrases. Don't make it look like you're just regurgitating exactly what the application asked for on your resume, but make sure that you're still mirroring those important keywords that the company is looking for. So some keywords that you might want to use for human eyes should also be included too, so that when you do pass the system, then you do start to see someone who is a person will start to look at those important aspects of your resume as well. So create a relevant category expertise section or adjust the summary to add relevant category experience. So client relationship management, revenue growth, risk management, all of those items are going to be important to put on your application so that it is seen by the software. Don't use photos, don't use shapes, watermarks, anything like that on your resume, any background images that might distort what the actual text says or maybe would just make your resume completely unreadable. Try and use bulleted lists where you can and not paragraphs to describe anything that you want the the reader or the system to see, and make sure that it's easy for the system to pull out that information. And bulleted lists are also easier on human eyes too, as you're scanning and you're looking for that important criteria in a resume. Some software will also check your social network posts and any time your name pops up on certain sites like LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter. So make sure that what you post on those sites also matches your resume. Make sure that the job descriptions and the job titles of your past experiences are all uniform and connect with what you're saying. The ultimate goal is to get your resume in the hands of humans. So all these tips should help you get over that first hurdle and get your resume into the hands of a human screener. I talked a little bit about the words to use and the words to avoid, but before we move on to cover letter, I just wanted to stop and show this short video from Indeed about some helpful word choices that you will want to use on your resume. And as we watch the video, feel free to ask any questions you have about maybe your resume or chat us some of your own suggestions for strong action words that you've used or you currently have on your resume. Fatima, I don't know if the sound is on.
And words to avoid. With my thought leadership and core competency on this topic, you'll be able to think outside of the box and really move the needle. Trust me, I'm a hard worker and it's all in my wheelhouse. Now, if what I just said sounded off, you're not wrong. Half of the words I used are actually ones to avoid on your resume. Don't remember which ones? Those are no-nos. No business lingo, no givens, and nothing too general. Now, I'll show you the words you want to include. Strong action verbs that speak to your value at past jobs. To convey your communication skills, use words like collaborated, conveyed, instructed, performed. For creative positions, get crafty with authored, brainstormed, briefed, communicated, conceptualized. For financial gigs, these pay off. Audited, classified, halted, equalized, dispensed. For sales, these words sound marketable, captured, conserved, converted, earned, generated. Lastly, for all those tech positions, get technical with words like advanced, architected, automated, coded, deployed. Well, I think that's everything. Remember that the smallest moves are sometimes the smartest.
So we saw in this short video, there's a lot of different words you can use, and all of those words could be tailored to your industry as well. There are plenty of words that would work across industries, but I liked how this video just broke it down by the different type of professional industry you might be in. Other great words are managed or monitored, conducted, organized, words that show exactly what you've been doing and not the passive that I was tasked with or I was told to do X. It's actually showing how you delivered or you facilitated or whatever the strong action verb is that you undertook during your previous position. So think about some of those words that you saw in the video. Think about some of your own words and how to make sure that your resume shows those strong action verbs. So the second half of our presentation is about cover letters. But before we get into cover letters, I want to pause for any questions that we do have about resumes that have maybe come in the first half of the session.
We have one question that came in. The question is, what is the best file format for a resume?
I would go with a PDF format. If you use a Word document, the person might be using a different type of computer. Your document might be out of line or might span over 2 pages. I think a PDF is perfect because it's something that everyone's computer, because it's protected, is going to be able to open up, and it's not something that can be edited to, so it's protected. So that would be my response to that question. So yeah, let's talk about cover letters. So what is a cover letter? A cover letter is your first impression. You want a hiring manager to look at your cover letter and be intrigued enough to call you for an interview. It's an introduction to yourself and your interest in the role that you're applying for. So you want to make sure that you align your cover letter with the role and the skills that are being asked for. You want to be able to provide a personality to your application. So you have your resume, which talks about all your experience and all your qualifications, but the cover letter talks about who you are. You want to demonstrate likability and a fit within the organization. And you don't want to simply repeat what you said in your resume. You want to be able to add something more, something that, again, you would show your personality, shows the uniqueness of you as a candidate. Cover letters are important because they are a quick way to introduce yourself to the employer and to give them a taste of your personality. Like I said, it's not just your skills, it's about your personality. You want whoever is reading this to know why you're sending them your resume. Why are you applying for this position? What about you makes you a good fit? It's not always required for every position. You might just see that a resume is all the host employer is asking for, but I think a pro tip and a best practice is to write a cover letter even if it's not required, because it'll, at minimum, make you stand out because you might be one of the only or the few candidates that have actually written a cover letter. But at best, it could also show, oh, this person, they've done other things that they didn't list in their resume that makes them an excellent candidate, and that's who we want to bring in for an interview. So I think sometimes people feel that hiring managers don't read cover letters because they might not be getting feedback on their cover letter, but hiring managers do. And sometimes they even read their cover letter of a candidate before they've read a resume, especially if it's an internship position where they're looking for someone who's detail-oriented or has strong communication abilities and writing skills. Your cover letter is a writing sample. It's how you present yourself. And it can be hard to stay motivated to keep writing cover letters if you're not getting that feedback, but you don't know, unfortunately, you don't know what hiring manager prefers what, and whether or not your cover letter is going to be the make or break aspect of your application. But I do understand that that's hard if you aren't getting feedback on the cover letters that you are writing. So we're gonna try and give some tips on how to maximize your efficiency when you are writing cover letters, and to also help write excellent cover letters that you don't need to be applying for many internship positions, because maybe you can apply for just a few and get an offer from there. So our first tip for cover letters is to address it to the hiring manager. Do your best to customize your letter and make sure that you're addressing to the right person, that you're showing that you've done a bit of research, even if it's not listed in the internship position, that you looked up the company, you know who the person is on the other side of this. Proofread your cover letter as well. Make sure that there's no grammatical errors. If I think we have some people on the line from the UK. If you're calling from the UK, if you're joining us from the UK, there might be some spelling differences as well. Trying to adjust that to the US style of spelling if you're applying for a position in the US. Keep your cover letter at about 3 or 4 paragraphs. So the first paragraph should just be an introduction. Maybe the second and third are your content that talks a little bit more about who you are and the skills that you have and what you've done in the past. And your last paragraph is just a wrap up and thanking them for taking the time to consider your application. So keep your cover letter simple, keep it professional, keep it honest. Don't embellish details that are going to embarrass you in an interview when they ask you questions about them and they aren't true. But you can also add more personality that might not be in your resume. So you can show your passion for the position, whether it's because they're a company you've always been following, or they roll out a product that's really crucial in your day-to-day life. You can really hone in on what it is that makes this position special for you, and why you're so excited to consider the possibility of joining that organization. Cover letter is not where you're going to start to discuss salary requirements. I wouldn't put in even the J1 visa aspect at that point. I think those are all discussions that you can have later on. This is just an introduction to the company and explaining who you are. So some cover letter tips. So the first paragraph is the introduction paragraph. So you want to start with a strong lead. You want to tell them about how you found the position and what drew you to the organization. But then you want to quickly transition to all of the other information about the areas of your career that have made you apply for the position and made you demonstrate interest in the position. So you differentiate your application here. You can provide some interview fodder, but you don't want this section to be more than 4 sentences at the most. You don't want this to be the whole history of who you are as a candidate and why you think this is the best company ever. It should be maybe a quick anecdote, a sentence or two about how you found the position and why you're really interested in the company, but then you're going to segue the rest of your cover letter into who you are. So don't get too drawn in on writing the perfect introduction, but make sure it's clear and concise of why you're interested in this organization. So then we'll move into the content section. So this is the bulk of your cover letter. So this is where you demonstrate the skills and knowledge that you have that are relevant to the position. You can talk about the abilities and the experiences that you have, and maybe use some examples of what you've done in the past, how you think that relates to what's listed in the internship description. Maybe even you've done some research on the company and you know they're working on a very specific new project and new product that they're going to roll out. So you can even try and tie in some of those connections there. Oh, I was working to develop project X. I see you're working to develop project Y, and I'll be able to use some of my project management skills, my ability to use Python software or run JavaScript or things that you think will connect. That all is in the content section of your cover letter. You're focusing on the employer needs in this part too. So you want to keep that mindset of what are they looking for? What do they want in a candidate? Not just what do they want to hear, what do you have that they actually want? And this is where you'll use some of those keywords from the job description. You can use the anecdotes that I talked about that would maybe be relevant. And anything that you deem is important but just doesn't fit cleanly into your resume. Maybe it just wouldn't come across as an important bullet, or maybe it's a little bit too lengthy and needs a full sentence of an explanation. You can put that in the content section of your cover letter. Like I said, 1 to 2 paragraphs max for this section though. So you want to make sure that you're not just repeating information you've already said, that everything is new, and that it fits in cleanly and helps build your application, and everything is moving forward. You're not just repeating stuff. You're not adding stuff that you think is great but isn't relevant to the position at all. So less is more, and I think quality over quantity here for sure. And then the end of your cover letter is where you wrap it all up. So you tie it together. Maybe it's one concise sentence of why you're the best fit, and then you thank them for considering your application. You want to show confidence and enthusiasm for the position, but not aggressiveness. So no hard sells at the end. Be grateful, but write in your resume that you're writing your cover letter that you're grateful, and you look forward, or you hope that they'll invite you, or you're happy to discuss more in an interview. So ask for that interview too. Make sure that you're moving to the next step. The goal of your resume and cover letter submission is to get an interview with this organization, and make sure you put that line towards the end as well. So we have here just an example of an entry-level cover letter. So this is a 4-paragraph cover letter. So it starts with the person demonstrating that they are a longtime admirer of the organization, who they are, they're a recent graduate, they have some experience that they're going to go into a little bit more, and that's all in the introduction. In the second paragraph, they talk about their former role at the University of Rochester, and what they were responsible for, what they did. They also put in some quantitative stats that I think is really important too, like how did they help to improve the University of Rochester's technical services. And then they use a whole separate paragraph, which I think is fine to do as well, to say, I understand this company is looking for someone to do X, Y, and Z. And again, while I was at the position, I did all of these related things. So they separated into two short paragraphs, one talking about what they did, and the second one transitioning into how this all relates to the position that's being posted, which I think is fine as well. And then their wrap up is explaining that they've attached their resume. It talks a little bit more about their skills and experiences. They say, please don't reach out if you have any questions, and they look forward to the opportunity to speak further about the position. That's really all you need to write in the wrap up paragraph. Another example of a cover letter, which we'll talk about, is an employer needs letter. So there are other versions of cover letters that do exist. The standard is the most common, and I think for probably most people, if not everyone on this call, this is the best type of cover letter. Might depend on the industry or position though, so I want to talk about who might use an employer needs and who might use a hybrid cover letter. An employer needs allows you to quickly list your relevant skills and your accomplishments. And that way you can instantly show a host employer that you're the perfect match for the available position. So it's a very short intro and a very short wrap up, filled with some of your skills and what they need focused in the middle. So this is an excellent format for someone who is in the middle of a career change because it showcases that you have the skills and expertise that they need, even if you maybe were in a different industry or had a different work history. It's also a great option for someone who's proposing an internship, where you say, I've really been following your organization. I see that you're on the verge of doing this, and I have the skills because I just graduated and I did a project that relates, or I did internships that relate, even if they're maybe not necessarily in the exact same field. So employer needs can have multi-purpose if you're very high up, or if you're just starting out and you're trying to propose an internship position. The hybrid, it begins like a paragraph, but the content sections are set up like the employer needs. So the hybrid model is great for someone who has a gap in their experience. Maybe they are also doing a career transition, or they have relevant experience that may not be on a resume. Maybe they have volunteer experience, or maybe they taught English abroad, and that will help them in their in the position that they're applying for. In a lot of industries too, you might want to include samples of your work or pieces from your portfolio, especially if it's a field like architecture or graphic design, maybe writing samples if it's PR or communications related, but you don't want anything overwhelming in your application. So your cover letter is a separate document. You're not going to have a cover letter and then on page 3 and page 4, it's going to include all your other writing samples. So keep that in mind too. Make sure that your cover letter is just your cover letter. So I want to go into some key takeaways from this presentation about resumes and cover letters. So our first is to make a strong impression. Make sure that the first thing the host employer sees about you is something that they like and they want to hear, and it puts your best foot forward. Our second takeaway is to make sure that you're following any proper formatting that's needed. This is important. It shows you have an eye for detail, and it makes it easier for the host employer to read your resume and cover letter. It makes it easy for application screening software to parse through your resume. I always recommend that people use the same font and the same heading on their cover letter as they do on a resume too. It makes it easy if a host employer prints out all the resumes that come in. They can match yours very easily because it has the same size and maybe the same heading on those two documents. Use relevant action verbs. Make sure that the verbs that you choose are relevant to the position you're applying for and to your past experience. Make sure it makes sense. Also, keep your resume concise. There's no need to go over one page, especially if you're early in your career. If it's something that you're really proud of but doesn't relate to the position, bring it up in the interview. Figure out a way to work it into the cover letter, but don't add it to your resume if it's going to make your resume more than a one page. Again, 30 seconds is what a hiring manager averages when they look at a resume. So make sure in that 30 seconds they're seeing what they need to see. Match your resume to the position that's being posted. Make sure that you copy down the internship position that you see online, in case, especially if they take it down, so you have it to reference. And make sure that you've thoroughly read all of the key qualities, all of the job description, the duties, what they're looking for, the summary of the organization, what their 5-year plan is, and make sure that you're matching your resume to that organization and that position so it fits in well. I said this before and I'll say it again, but always submit a resume and a cover letter, even if they don't ask for a cover letter. There's no harm in submitting a cover letter, and if you've already written a main cover letter that you're just editing here and there similar to your general resume, it's not like you need to recreate the wheel each time that you submit a new cover letter. Explain your interest in the position when you're applying for any new position. So make sure that you're explaining why this position interests you, and not just that you need to do an internship to graduate or you want to go to San Francisco to visit your sister. Make sure that you're explaining why this is a good fit and what you're excited about in this company, and not all the ancillary aspects. Be honest about your qualifications. in what you have done in the past, what you're capable of doing, what level you are as whether it's an English speaker or computer programmer, that you are honest in those qualifications, because it is going to come out and they're probably going to ask you in the internship interview. And if you do get the internship position and don't have the skills that are needed to do the position, it's not going to be an enjoyable experience. It's going to be a really tough time. And unfortunately, we do see from time to time that interns do get positions in the States and it just doesn't work out because they have embellished their abilities or they're not able to keep up with the training that's being offered by the host employer. So be honest about your qualifications and don't exaggerate to a point that's going to get you in trouble later down the line. And last but not least is proofread your application. Make sure that you're not sending a cover letter to company A and it's addressed to company B. Make sure that your spellings are correct. Make sure that there's no weird formatting, that you've updated everything that you need to update. So really important before you hit submit on any email that includes your resume that you've double checked that attachment and you've read through and make sure that all of the information is accurate and looks good and looks professional. So with that, we have a slide here for questions and answers. I want to put our contact information if you do have any questions. We do have another 7 career guidance webinars coming up this fall. So we have a slew of more topics that we'll talk about. I think next week I said that Fatima is going to discuss LinkedIn profiles, but we have a session on networking. We'll talk about best practices for working in a US office environment. So we have a lot more sessions coming up from now until mid-October, and we'll conclude with a panel of alumni who have done internships in the United States, and we'll ask them about their experiences and advice that they would have to prospective interns who are coming to the United States. So if you do have any questions, please submit them to us now. I'm happy to answer. We have about 10 minutes for question and answer. I see a couple. I see the little icon going off. So Fatima, if we want to go through some of the questions that are coming in so far.
Yeah, so we have 4 questions that came in. The first question is, what type of resume is better for an internship, chronological or functional?
I would say for an internship, a chronological is probably going to make the most sense, especially if the internship is related to the courses that you've studied and some of your past experience. But if you are a business student and you are applying for an internship in fashion design and you don't really have anything on your course listing or anything in your past internships that is going to make a fashion designer say, oh, this person has the experience, that's when I would shift to a functional. I think in most cases, a chronological is going to make the most sense for an internship application. Everyone's different, every industry is different. So when you do have your resume set to go and you have it in either format, make sure that you're getting advice from friends and family and the Career Center University or other people in your network to say, does this make the most sense? So I don't want to say for sure that chronological is the only way you can do it or is definitely the best, because I don't know all the details, but that would be my instinctive response.
Great. And the second question that came in is, what if I can't get my resume under 2 pages?
I would have someone else look at it as well and see what they recommend, what they think is maybe too much information. I would look maybe at formatting options. If we go back to, Fatima, if you don't mind, if we go back to slide 6, there's a lot of information on this slide for the chronological resume, but the person has done a really good job of making sure that it's just one column. Even some of the lines are very long, but they've been able to put a lot of information on one page. So it could be a formatting issue where you might want to think about, if you have a 2-column resume, to move it to a 1 column, but it could be that some of the information is just not relevant. And here on this example, none of these responses have more than 3 bullets. So I talked about your general resume. Maybe your general resume has a lot of bullets underneath the Blackstone Group New York section. Maybe you did 10 things that you're really proud of, but if only 4 of them relate to this position, then cut those 6 out for now. And maybe when you apply to another position, maybe a different 4 or 3 apply to the position. So keep editing it. But your general resume can be longer than 1 page, but your final project that you submit for your final resume that you submit for each internship position, you want to narrow that one down a little bit more. So I wouldn't get worried about getting it under 1 page for the resume that you have as your general resume, but the final submission, that's where you really want to think closely of, does a host employer who is looking for an internship, do they really need to know that I am one of 20 undergraduates selected for a summer internship undergraduate program? Like, is that the most important information? And that's where you might start to think, well, no, it's more important for them to know this than that, and not to bombard them with all the information.
Awesome. And the third question is, how long should my cover letter be in length?
3 to 4 paragraphs in length. Again, that shouldn't go over 1 page as well. So I think the longest paragraph should maybe be 4 sentences. You don't need to do a full 5-sentence paragraph where you have an introduction and you have a strong conclusion, you have 3 supporting sentences. It's just 3 to 4 paragraphs of an introduction of who you are. So I wouldn't get too detailed. I would, I think the example that we had a couple slides ago was on the longer side of what would be appropriate for a cover letter.
And another question just came in. Should I mention on my resume if I participated in the Work and Travel USA program?
I think it's a positive in a lot of resumes to include that you have international experience. I think that you want to include that, especially if you've done the Work and Travel program. It is a work experience program that you can have, or it is a work experience that you already have. So I think including that position would be useful. I would be careful about how much time you dedicate to explaining exactly what the Work and Travel program is, and what a J1 visa is. You don't want your resume to get too into the details about the logistics of what a J1 program is. If you had come and I know a lot of J1 Work and Travel students go to places like Cape Cod, or out, I think, in the Jersey Shore. You could put that you spent a summer working on Cape Cod or the Jersey Shore, and I think that would be sufficient as part of your experience section, instead of explaining like I was a J1 Work and Travel student.
Thanks. And the last question is, can the cover letter include personal information like my age and religion?
I wouldn't include your age or your religion in your cover letter. I don't think those are important details that the host employer would be making a decision on who they select as an intern. So I think religion is one that I would definitely stay away from, unless the position you're applying for has specific religious aspects of it. Again, age is something that's probably, as long as you are above working age, you should be fine for the position. So if there's a way, if it's woven in a way that makes sense, fine, but I wouldn't go out of your way to include any personal information, like your age, your religion, if you're married, like those things, not needed and not really appropriate or necessary for any type of application.
Okay, I think that is all the questions that came in today. Thank you, Tam, so much for answering all those questions so well.
Well, thank you, and thank you everyone for joining us. We're happy. We'll send this resume and cover letter presentation to everyone who signed up. But if you do have any questions, we're happy to answer questions in between these webinars. So please feel free to reach out to us at training@interexchange.org between now and next Tuesday. But we hope to see you all again next week.
All right, bye everyone. Thank you for attending.
Bye.